So I guess the big thing we've had recently is a lot of people talking about why recovery isn't happening.
I think it's really, for me, it comes down to the fact that I think that people are beginning to get the theory of recovery and the process, but what they're not really seeming to be able to do is then transfer that into practice.
So are we saying that people are talking the talk but not walking the walk here?
In a way, I think they're trying. I think they're doing the things that they're learning in theory, but it's something's missing.
So so what's that missing ingredient then? What is this thing that's missing that's stopping recovery from really gaining much more momentum as a practice rather than as a theory?
I think it's the barriers that we put in place, both as workers and as systems, that mean we don't go that extra mile.
Is there not also a case that consumers themselves put barriers in?
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's barriers all the way around, and I suppose part of the learning is breaking those barriers down and understanding what the barriers are, and what ones that we can influence as individuals, and what ones need to be changed by the whole system.
So if we break the barriers down, then we would think that there's barriers that are caused by the consumer, there's barriers caused by the professional, there's barriers caused by the system, but also there's barriers maybe caused by family and influences of friends.
Yeah, I think all of those things. I think, if we started looking at some of these barriers, I mean, the most obvious one is risk.
Okay.
And the way that we risk assess for everything now, has led to actually very defensive practice. And I think when you get into defensive practice, it's very hard to do recovery.
Is it defensive practice, Karen, though, or is it reactive practice?
I think it's probably both.
Because for me, defensive practice can be useful in terms of being able to clearly show the process that we followed when we're working with someone. Whereas reactive practice tends for me to be much more of this sort of we must cocoon the person and protect them. Or it's our jobs on the line. It's not about the person then, it becomes about the practitioner.
I suppose what I'm talking about by defensive practice is that we're always worried about what happens if things go wrong. Is it my job that's going to be on the line? Is it going to be our organisation that won't get funded if something goes wrong? So all those sort of things come into play. And even as a probably family member, what are my other friends and family going to think if I say no to my son over, I don't know, money or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean, certainly with in the workforce where it's almost become for the want of a better word, a game. It's a game of, like in risk assessment. I think both of us agree that risk assessment's been set up in such a way nowadays that the aim is to say no, not to say yes to risk. So, for instance, we put the highest tariff on, has this person done anything in the past? Whereas normally we don't start really doing big main risk assessments on people until they've done something in the past. So automatically we're setting them up almost to fail when we start assessing that risk. And that must be a big barrier to recovery if we're saying that the person 10 years ago assaulted somebody or had a very serious suicide attempt, and we're using that as a basis of what's happening in the here and now without actually looking at what that person's journey's been since then.
What we're actually basically saying is that that people don't change. Yet everything about recovery practice is about understanding that people can change, want to change, and given the right set of factors, can go ahead and do that. But by the risk assessment being based on past events suggests that that's impossible. So you've got an immediate big barrier there.
So what do we do with that then?
Well, for me, what's much more important is the story, the context, the things that are happening for that person at that moment, and where are they in their journey? What is it they need to make that next leap, that next step forward in their recovery? So, we've often talked about this phrase adulting, that a lot of people that come into our system come in as teenagers, and if you like, they're still adolescents. And we know now through a lot of the work, psychology work, that when trauma happens, your development sort of can get stunted, if you like. So what we often end up with is a lot of 30, 40-year-old adolescents in our services, because they've been in the services for 20, 30 years. They've not had that growth. Yet when we start doing the recovery work, there comes that point where they want to start experimenting, doing things like we all did when we were in our 20s. So, they're going to come in and want to get drunk. They want to go out and get girlfriends, boyfriends. They want people to stay overnight. They want all the things that we had. Let's face it, if we look back at our 20s, But that was important in our growth to become adults.
But it's not risky.
Well, we did it. We survived. And, probably every person that will be helping somebody on a recovery journey has been through some pretty tricky moments during their adolescence or early 20s. It's normal. But somehow we're sort of saying that people who come into our services can't be normal.
So what we're saying for service users or consumers is that in order to be normal, they have to be more normal than normal to be accepted as normal.
Yeah.
That's a bit crazy, isn't it?
It is, but isn't the system crazy?
So the system in itself produces a sort of almost a cocoon of care that keeps the person trapped at the age they enter into the system.
I call it sort of cotton wooling them. They're sort of padded out with cotton wool. It's a bit like swaddling, isn't it? Swaddling, a baby to stop them from harming themselves. But if you did that with a baby and carried on doing it when they were a toddler, their limbs would stop working. And I suppose, if you took that analogy on, it's the same thing with the people that we're talking about. We swaddled them so tightly that their inability to grow successfully into adults disappears. And then, on top of that, we start talking about their behaviour and how they're stamping their feet and doing different things to sort of, or attention seeking and all those kind of things, when really all they're trying to tell us is, let me be.
So I wonder what other people think, and I hope people will get back to us on that and help us expand that debate. What about families, though? How do you think families are involved in this? Shall we call it arrested development almost?
Could be. Well, I think for families, again, it's very difficult. Their sons, daughters, wives, husbands, whatever, are in distressing circumstances. They may have seen them trying to kill themselves. They may have seen them in rages. They may have seen them running down the street naked, whatever. They've seen them in situations that they want to save that person from repeating. They've been told by the system they need to keep taking the medication, that they've got an illness that's going to last for life, all those kind of things. So the family take on almost a sort of pseudo-carer role. You must take your meds, you must do this, be in by this time, and sort of forget almost the person behind the diagnosis.
Are you saying the family almost by default become part of the system?
Yeah. And especially here in the UK, in Australia, I think it's true in. I don't think it's quite the same in the US, but certainly in those countries, you can get a carer's allowance, or an allowance that, you know, if you're had to give up work, or you're looking after the person that's unwell, you get an allowance. So you get almost status. Might not be unwanted status, but it's status from taking on that carer's role. And I suppose there becomes a difficulty when the person starts their recovery journey and starts moving forward and wanting to sort of push the boundaries of around them. The person who's been caring has to sort of sit there and think, well, what happens to me? I've given up my job for this person. I'm now on this allowance. If this person suddenly gets better, what are we going to do for money? You know, what am I going to do? And I don't think it's necessary they even think that out loud. It's almost like a subconscious panic thing. Oh, what happens next?
Sounds to me like you're saying that recovery practice requires also the family to recover.
Absolutely, and to the family to be involved, or have people who are there to talk to them too about this journey. They need the education to understand what recovery is about. You know, we want the family to be holders of hope. If the family are holders of hope, you know, we know that that's one of the biggest things that can help a person, is having people around them who say you can get through this. So we want them to understand recovery so they can take the person through, but we've also got to support the family when it gets tough, when they've got to say, let their son who's 28 but has been pretty unwell and now starts saying, you know, I want to go out, I'm going to stay out overnight, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. They've got to do exactly what they did with their other adolescent kids, if you like, and just say, yeah, okay, you know the dangers, you know all these kind of things. We know that you've got to do it.
Yeah, that sounds quite difficult for the family, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's not only difficult for the family. I think it's difficult for professional workers. You know, the slightest whiff that somebody may be having alcohol, or maybe entering a sexual relationship, sets a lot of workers into panic mode.
So we've got the workers panicking, the family panicking. So is it any wonder that recovery is becoming quite difficult for people to see the way through?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there are many families out there who do support and walk alongside the person, the same as there are professionals out there who do support and walk alongside the person. What we need to work with and think about is those people and those services that don't manage that, and how can we support them to do that.